I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to cover some ground. I do know we have questions and answers later in the day, but we hope to entertain a few questions and answers at this time as well. So 4 movements, since we understand preaching as to publicly proclaim and to teach. Okay? We'll talk about the public memorial, the public protest, the public address, and public prayer, which interestingly enough, in this way, I want to suggest has a homiletic quality to it. The prayers that we pray can also function, if you will, as sermons, as preaching, if they are done the right way. So preaching as public memorial, public protest, public address, and public prayer. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about context. I believe everything you need to know. So this is my context, City of Dallas, local context. I believe anything you need to know about the City of Dallas, you can largely know by this map. Okay? This is the redlining map of Dallas from 1939. Okay? I'm not going to assume everyone knows what redlining is, so let me break it down a little bit. We're in the midst of the Great Depression, and frankly, people are being moved from their homes. Foreclosure on their homes happening at a rapid pace. And so the federal government mobilized itself to protect white life. Okay? And one of the ways to protect white life is to keep white people in their homes and or give them an advantage in purchasing homes or beginning small businesses. Okay? So the banking institution, along with the federal government, comes up with this clever idea that they are going to color code municipalities. And based upon the color codes that they operate, will then determine the benefits that you will receive if you live in a certain area. Okay? So, for instance, the green areas are amongst the most prosperous and desirable areas. Okay? To live in those areas, you would have to be of Western European background, white Protestant. Okay? If you were in those areas, you could receive upwards to 80% of what you needed as a down payment. Imagine that you receive 80% of what you needed in order to put down to get a business or a home. All right? If you were in, let's say, the blue areas, okay, those are the least desirable whites. Okay, those are going to be Jews. Those are going to be your persons from Eastern European background. Those are going to be your Catholics. Okay, and if you live or reside in that area, you'll get about 60% of what you needed for your closing costs. All right? The yellow areas are going to be the most diverse areas that are represented here. Those are going to represent the poorest of the whites, those who can't live anywhere else, Latinos, persons of Asian background, and, for a little bit, upwardly mobile black people. Okay? Some were able to reside in these yellow areas. The red areas were areas exclusively for black people. If you're in the yellow areas, you may get to about 30-40% of what you needed. But in those red areas, you would receive zero funding. You could not get a loan for a home. You cannot get any financial support to start a brand new business, not from the banking institutions that were connected to the government. All right? So what does that mean? Okay, I've had a chance to show this map literally across the country. And it's a fascinating thing. You ever get some time, just type in a redlining map. Type in redlining map if you're not from Dallas, to just explore what's going on in your community. And to a T, every time I've shown the map, I've said one or two things are happening in these red areas. One or two things. Either these are the areas where poverty remains today and has grown off from, or these are the areas that are being most rapidly gentrified in your city. Okay? 1937. Now, why is this important? Dallas is the only major city in America, whose founding fathers who constructed the city either had a connection to the Confederacy or the Ku Klux Klan. Okay? Only major city in America. Card-carrying members of either came out of the Confederacy in one way or another, or were part of the Ku Klux Klan. Matter of fact, if you got on I-35 today, R.L. Thornton Freeway, major mayor of Dallas, that was a Ku Klux Klan leader. Okay? And the city of Dallas in the early 20th century, particularly the 1920s, teens and 20s, boasted the largest Ku Klux Klan chapter in America. To this day, the city of Dallas holds the record for the single greatest induction of new Ku Klux Klan members. That happened at the State Fair of Texas. Over 5,000 men, along with 800 women as part of the auxiliary group, in one single day, became a part of the Ku Klux Klan. There was a Ku Klux Klan day at the Fair Park, State Fair, okay? And if you're unaware of the violent history, between the years of 1950 and 1951, there were 11 bombings in my community of South Dallas, including one bombing they called the bombing of the year in America. Okay? What does that have to do with today? Well, I'm glad you asked. April 25th of this year, the Urban Institute came out with a report. Urban Institute studied 4 decades of census data as it relates to racial disparity and racial segregation. I'll give you the cliff notes on this. I'll encourage you to look it up. April 25th, Urban Institute report. They determined that out of 274 American cities, the city of Dallas is dead last in terms of racial segregation and racial inequity. We are 274 out of 274 American cities. What does that look like in real time? That looks like black people in Dallas County earn 54 cents to every dollar of every white person in Dallas County. Latinos, 58 cents to every dollar. What does that look like? That looks like the fact that we have led the nation in childhood poverty. Only last year slipped down to number 2. What does that look like? It looks like the 33 concentrated areas of poverty and growing in the city of Dallas, which is poverty surrounded by poverty. What does that look like? Well, connected correctly to this history of redlining, that looks like the fact that we have the single highest rate of single household renters in all of America. Okay? And on and on and on. Okay? In addition to that, as it relates to racial violence, John Fullenwater did a wonderful presentation at the Latino Cultural Center last night that I was able to share in and be a part of. How many of you knew that Dallas has been a decades leader in police brutality? For decades. During the 1980s, literally number 1 in all of America in terms of police brutality. And today, 2018, only Philadelphia and Phoenix have a higher rate of citizen fatality by police than the city of Dallas. And if things could not be made worse, there is currently a 60-foot tall monument to white supremacy that stands on the grounds of the Dallas Convention Center, only a few yards away from Dallas City Hall. And the persons who enabled that Confederate monument to remain were black city council persons. Which also speaks to the history of Dallas in that our black religious life was historically co-opted by the white business establishment to the extent of shutting out Dr. King and the civil rights movement from full participation in the life of the city of Dallas, even to the extent that if you were a black pastor and you decided to be involved in the movement, you would get a visit from the Pastor Coalition at that time threatening to take the mortgage on your church or your home if you vocalize your opposition. Okay? So that's the city of Dallas. How many of you are familiar with that history? There's more I could share. Okay? Just a few. All right? So you got to understand that context, understand the ways in which many of us have attempted or are attempting even now to respond to it. Okay? Any questions so far? Let's deal with public memorials. In April of 2017, April 29th to be exact, some young men in Balch Springs were leaving a party. They heard a gunshot in the distance. That gunshot was also heard by responding officers. The gunshot had nothing to do with the party that they were associated with. Someone shot a gun in the air in the parking lot of an adjacent nursing home. This young man, an honor student at Mesquite High School, and his brothers went into the vehicle and they did what you would tell a young person to do if you're ever out and you hear a gunshot, which is to get away as quickly as you can. As they were attempting to leave from this party, Roy Oliver pulled out his service rifle from the back of his trunk and indiscriminately in the dark shot 5 times into a vehicle driving in the opposite direction from him. One of those bullets pierced young Jordan Edwards in the head, and he died at the scene. We were able at our congregation to host, some of you were there, in the few days following this tragedy. Sean King, William Cornell Brooks, who at the time was the national president of NAACP, and others, for the only vigil and organizing meeting that the family would allow before their son was buried. A few days later, I was asked to come and to share as a part of the public vigil memorial that happened in his community of Balch Springs. Okay? I knew that a number of his classmates and friends were there, and these are some of the words that I was able to offer in that space.
Has cried out. Our souls have cried out to God. How long must we deal with the stain of police brutality? The name Jordan has rung out. Our hearts have been broken over and over again. And oftentimes, although after the fact, we desired to protect that young soul, so our souls have sung aloud, "Get away, Jordan. Get away from that party. Get away, Jordan. Drive swifter. Get away, Jordan. Get away from Oliver's gun." Yet Jordan is no more. But he did get away. Away from the evils of this world. Away from the racism that passes down from generation to generation as America's greatest inheritance. Away from evil itself.
As ministers, preachers, pastors, we are not unfamiliar with memorializing people. It's part of the job description. We do it on a fairly regular basis. But in terms of a public memorial, there are a few other things that are occurring that impacts your delivery. One is very often the case that you do not know the deceased personally. So how do you personalize a sermon, a message, with integrity for someone you don't really know? Okay. The other aspect is oftentimes in these moments or in these cases, information is still coming in. Okay? So you don't know everything that has occurred. So how can you also operate with integrity with maybe the limited information that you have at that time? Okay? Also in a space like this, and you can see that even with the presentation of individuals there, not everyone there comes from the Christian faith. So how are you able to preach within your tradition in a way that does not exclude or block people out from participating in this moment of grieving? Okay? Those are all things that you're seeking to balance at that time. We'll come back to this because I have some suggestions I want to give on the other end, or towards the end of the presentation. But I want to go to another recent public memorial, if you will. More recent now. Bolton Shum John was killed in his home on Marsh Street only a few weeks ago. Many of you remember that. This was the first vigil planned outside of the Dallas Police Headquarters. Some of you were there, present, or active in that. And again, the situation of someone you did not know. The occurrence happened less than 24 hours, and based on the best information made possible to step in that space and help the community more.
Bolton was a Bible study leader, and I know he probably knew the words of the psalmist, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And there may be no greater image tonight for the stain of police brutality upon this nation than the image of a broad valley.
Let me stop there, okay, because I want to have a connecting point here, all right? So, in terms of Jordan, the presentation of Jordan Edwards, as I was preparing those words, I thought immediately about the Jordan River.
Yes.
All right? How do we then connect the experience of this young man with that biblical heritage? Okay. For me, with Bolton Sean John, right? I didn't know this individual. This is recent information. How do I connect with the essence of who this individual is, even as more information is coming out? For me, the etymology of words then becomes important. The name. What can I find? What can I mine out from the name that might have meaning? What I discovered concerning Bolton is that his name means a broad valley. This then provides you with some material with which to work, right? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And to me, that image, for me personally, as I was thinking about it, a broad valley. It's very oppressive. It's something you get in but can't get out of, can't exit very quickly. And for me, that was an image that was meaningful in talking about not only his life, but talking about the overarching issue of police brutality and racism as well. All right? Only had 45 minutes, so let me keep it going, all right? If you have questions, please take note of that. We want to make sure that we get to them either at this time or another time to come. Talk about public address, okay? Preaching as public address, okay? For me, this is literally preaching to power. Okay, how do you preach to power? All right? That's at your city council meeting. That's at your school board meeting. That's before the citadels of power in this nation. How do you craft a message that directly challenges power to do what ought to be done? All right? So I got another video I want to show to you. This is a couple of weeks after Bolton's death. And this is, just so you know, this is an impromptu delivery. Okay? I had not anticipated, I had not gone with the expectation of delivering any address. I had literally gone to a press conference happening right outside of City Hall, and I had planned on just showing my support. The organizer saw that I was there and asked me to come say some words. I did so. I was going to leave from there, but then I saw the energy of the people as they stormed into the chambers. And I felt like, okay, I need to go where the people are going, all right? So I went in there and I took a seat, and I saw acts of disruption as they were taking place. I think very necessary acts of disruption, and decided, you know what, I need to participate. Just so happens that as I approached the lectern to participate in the disruption, the mayor of this city, with whom I've had some engagements, has a knack for shutting things down when I step up. And so only moments after I stepped up to speak, he literally closed the entire meeting, said, put it into recess, which was the best thing that can happen. The reason it was the best thing that would happen is that because we were in recess and because some of the other council persons were there, I was not then bound, if you will, by the rules of time limits or topic. I was given a gift, and the gift of a whole lot of media around, and the opportunity to say whatever I wanted to say. Okay? And so this is what I said. Back in April of this year, April 25th to be exact, this city council had the opportunity to make a statement to the world. That statement is that Black Lives Matter to the city of Dallas. Instead, this council decided to uphold the legacy of white supremacy in the city of Dallas into the 21st century by not bringing down immediately a
a monument to white supremacy. I want you to see the historical connections then, that only a few blocks from where a monument to white supremacy continues to stand, a young black man was executed in his own home. When you put that together, since the city already declared that black lives don't matter, it's clearly understandable that this young man's life would be taken and his family's heart would be broken. I come to appeal to the city council to do several things. One is to put on the agenda a citizens review board that has subpoena power. It has been almost 50 years since an officer in the city of Dallas has been convicted in the murder of a Dallas citizen. And I do not believe in almost 50 years, every incident of fatal force used was authorized. Now I want you to sit with this. On April 25th of this year, the Urban Institute came out with a report, studied over 274 American cities with over 100,000 residents. Studied these cities as relates to racial segregation. Studied these cities as relates to inequalities amongst the races. And would you know that the city of Dallas came in dead last in all of America? 274 out of 274 American cities. In particular, I want to call upon our black city council person, because I recognize that in April of this year, had a black man stood up to take down a monument to white supremacy, it would have come down. I don't understand how a black man can go to honor those who live some. Not only that, but for every council person who decided not to take a moral vote for political expediency, I'll speak to your heart. And I ask you in the spirit of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the time is always right to do what is right, and now is the time to do what is right. Please no longer tell us on your memos that this is a diverse, vibrant, and progressive city. Not when poor are dying across our city. Not when I have to tell my son I gotta go speak, and the first thing he asks me as I'm on my way out the door is who died now. Each and every one of you has a moral obligation to the city of Dallas. All of these issues are connected. The poverty of our city, the legacy of white supremacy. It is no mistake that early in the 20th century, this city had the largest KKK chapter in all of America. It is no mistake that in this city we had the largest single-day induction of the Ku Klux Klan in American history. It is no mistake that a young Latino boy was shot down with an allegation that he stole from a vending machine, and that his brother's feet in the back seat of the police cruiser were soaked in blood. I appeal to each and every one of you, council persons, today, do not delay justice. Do what is right for the city of Dallas. Bring down Confederate Confederate monuments, uplift the Citizens Parade Board, and make sure that every person in the city of Dallas has a means of work, a means of education, a means of driving, a means of living, and I'm asking you to do it. In the name of the God who calls us together in service, who declares, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, recovery and sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to declare the year of the Lord's favor. We need justice. We demand justice. Let there be justice. Until justice flows like water and righteousness like a mighty stream.
So that's preaching as a public address, okay? And the rules apply a little bit differently because you're in a civic space, right? Never do you appear before power without making demands. Be very clear about what we are requesting, asking, demanding, have to come with an agenda, okay? So the two particular asks or demands were bring down this monument to white supremacy and develop a citizens review board with subpoena power. And all of that is couched within the racial history of the city, arcing from Confederate monuments to the death of both and John, and all of the statistics, if you will, that speak of how deadly life is in Dallas. All right, that's public address. Let me press on in the interest of time. I tell you, we're going to come back to a few of these at another time, all right? So the next part is protest. I don't know, I think I might have a little bit of time to share with you this. This happened same month as Charlottesville, okay? And we were pressuring the city council again to take action to bring down what was at the time 2 Confederate monuments erected in the city in particular, one off of Oak in Oak Lawn, the Lee Monument, as well as the so-called Civil War Memorial, the 60-foot tall monument that continues to remain on Dallas Convention City Hall, Dallas Convention Center property, okay? We were pushing, pressuring, and got a lot of pushback from the mayor and city council. They did not want to take any action. And so organizers put together, some of you may have been present there. I've heard numbers ranging from 3,000 to 5,000 individuals who gathered on the plaza of City Hall to make demands that the monuments would come down, okay? And these are the few words that I shared. This is a little bit different. This is protest, all right? So the address is to speak directly to the power, all right? Protest is to motivate the people, if you will, to engage the power, okay? Motivate the people to engage the power. This is a little bit of what I had to say. I'm not sure if we can see the whole thing, but we'll see.
Okay, and it is my humble honor to welcome the next speaker, Pastor Michael Waters.
In the same year that monuments were erected down the street in Pioneer Park, the United States Supreme Court offered a ruling called Plessy versus Ferguson. Their ruling suggested that segregation should be the law of the land, and that one drop of black blood excluded a person from the rights of this nation. In the same year, 1936, that a monument was erected in Lee Park. Jesse Owens won the 100-meter dash in Nazi Germany. A nation that said it was impossible because by birth, a black man was inferior. But friends, I don't want to just focus on what happened in 1896 or what happened in 1936. I want to talk about what happened right here in downtown Dallas in 1910.
Yes.
On March 3rd, 1910, white supremacy lifted its ugly head. A gentleman by the name of Allen Brooks had been accused of a crime. But because he was a black man in America, the mere accusation made him guilty. And on the day of his trial, white supremacy broke into the courtroom. White supremacy put a noose around his neck. White supremacy pulled him from the second floor of the red courthouse. White supremacy pulled him down Main Street. When the rope around his neck broke, white supremacy put another rope around his neck and dragged him the remainder of that half mile and lynched him at the corner of Main and Acker. And friends, you cannot understand 1896, you cannot understand 1936 until you understand 1910. Because I want to suggest that the same persons who lifted their heads as monuments were erected in Pioneer Park, the same persons that lifted their heads as a monument was erected in 1936, were the same persons who lifted their heads when a black body was lifted in 1910. White supremacy comes with the body count. And the blood of our ancestors cries out to us aloud today that justice should be delayed no more. At the bottom of official Dallas memos, it says Dallas, the city that works, diverse, vibrant, progressive. And we gathered here together to declare that is a lie as long as these monuments continue to stand in the city of Dallas. Mayor Rollins, we've been waiting since 1896. Mayor Rollins, we've been waiting since 1936. Do not tell us to wait anymore. We cannot wait for our passports. Yes, sir. The time is always right to do what is right, and now is the time to do what is right in the city of Dallas. Now is the time to bring these monuments down.
In the interest of time, I won't go to the conclusion of this, but I use the story of Josiah to close out. And the purging of the land, the bringing down of the idol gods to bring about a new day. And how that mirrored the work that we were aspiring to do together, that we could not become the nation we're supposed to be as long as idols to white supremacy continue to stand. Yes? Mm-hmm.
So after we do the rallies and we make posters, what are the steps to actually getting the statue to actually come down? Like, what are the actual steps to actually make it happen?
Sure. So a lot of things are happening. Public address, if you will, public preaching is a tool in the toolbox. But there are many things that are happening in and around this. Just very quickly, a few things that are happening are meeting with actual members of the council, lining up votes, determining who stands where. Ultimately, the Lee Monument came down. And this was a turning point in that issue, right? They were going to delay that. this moved it up on the agenda and also redirected the task force. You heard me say we can't wait on the task force. Part of the pressure point was that the mayor was proposing putting a task force to investigate whether or not these monuments should come down. And we demanded no, make the determination that they should come down, and then develop the task force to figure out what to do with them. Right, which is a different kind of policy push. Also, what happened on September 6th, very quickly, is that the city of Dallas, although it has not upheld its part of the bargain on it, on September 6th, 2017, the city passed an ordinance that said that anything that honors the Confederacy in Dallas is illegal on public property, right? We're still, again, pushing them to hold true to that concerning the other monument. But again, this is just a part of what was going on in terms of meetings, strategizing, and all those other things, okay? Let me move on quickly. We got a little bit of time back since we started a little bit later. But let me go now to public prayer, okay? Public prayer as part of preaching in this unjust world, right? So last year as well, I had an opportunity to pray before the U.S. House of Representatives. I'll be honest, I did not think they were going to let me pray the prayer I submitted. I was fully prepared for them to reject it. I thought it might be a little bit too much in this space. I was very happy to hear from the chaplain of the House of Representatives that they absolutely wanted me to pray that prayer. I didn't know if I can get away with using the word tyranny on the House floor. But I was given that opportunity, and I'm going to show this very quick prayer. It's not a long prayer. You don't get that much time when you're there. But I want you to see this, if you will, as part of public prayer, as a part of preaching in an unjust world. It's the last video I got.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by the guest chaplain, the Reverend Dr. Michael W. Waters, Joy Tabernacle AME Church, Dallas, Texas. Immutable God, greater than all that has or ever will be conceived, hear our prayer. For ancestors at rest in the abode of angels, accosted and assaulted while present upon these shores, enduring avalanches of animus never atoned. For babies bombarded by bombs, bounties placed upon their beautiful heads at birth. For the cacophony of cries citing crimes against humanity, countless cycles of crisis with casualties colored in chalk. In your name, we shall resist evil by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Grant that we become drum majors of justice, promulgators of peace, architects of America freed from greed, hate, oppression, racism, suppression, indeed the very threat of tyranny, replete with liberty and justice for all. Till that great day, when lions shall lie down with lambs, and we study war no more, when justice flows like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream, and all God's children are finally free. Amen.
So the question there was, how can I take the House of Representatives to task and they don't know that I did it? How can I call out the violence in this nation in such a way that it gets out the message before they know what actually happened? All right? And that was a prayer that I prayed. So in the interest of time, closing this here, I want to focus on a few things and I will be out of your way. Okay? 5 things to consider in terms of public preaching. Preaching the public space. We're making the determination or making a differentiation between preaching in a pulpit, in a religious space, versus preaching in public spaces, whether that be through prayer, whether that be through an address, whether that be through a protest, whether that be through a public memorial. First thing is the audience is bigger than what you see. Okay? The audience is bigger than what you see. Because of the gift of technology every one of us are only a button away from the world. Push one button and we have access to the world. So it doesn't necessarily matter who's actually there when the cameras are there, right? So Dr. Aaron and I were at the Pioneer Cemetery last year. We were making an address, and we were greeted by members of the KKK and Neo-Confederates. You remember that very well, right?
How can I forget it?
And they didn't say anything while any of the other speakers were speaking, but when a black man, myself, got up to speak, they rushed in and tried to shout out my words. Now, some persons at that time said, let's go home. I know movement history. I said, we got them right where we want them. Come on in, let's talk. And of course, what happens? All of the cameras converge from every angle. And you're able then to now pepper them with questions that really point out their ignorance, right? One of which, the questions that I asked, ended up on John Oliver. Last week tonight with John Oliver. It was made a meme, seen all over the world, right? So even though it was a small group of people that were gathered at that cemetery, what actually transpired there reached the world, okay? So anytime you're speaking in the public space, don't just get caught up with those who are right there before you.
Right.
The audience is much larger than that, all right? Number two, stories are a better vehicle than statistics. Okay, narratives connect far deeper than statistics. Know your data. You know, you want to make sure that as you're standing there, you can make a very good argument. But you got to find a way to couch the data or the emotion of what's happening in a story. Okay? So one of the stories that you've heard me share here in some recent travels, just got back from California and sharing as part of voter mobilization, is my son. Of course, life is full of all kinds of illustrations if your eyes are open. So I'm going to the Both and John rally, and my son's 12 years old, sees me on the way out the door, and says, Dad, where you going? He said, I got to go speak. I had to move very quickly. He says, Dad, who died now? Something you can work with that speaks to the urgency of this moment. The children are so familiar with the frequency of death in our society that they're asking, who died now? Okay, it's a better vehicle for connecting, or the historical story of dragging Alan Brooks and taking the time to vividly unpack that horror. All right? Number three, put in work. The same way that we prayerfully study in preparation to preach in the church, in my opinion, the same level of preparation we need to put in when we're speaking in public spaces. Okay? And when we stand, we know what we are talking about. We have studied, we have read. We've not just read the things that go along with our opinion. We've even taken the time to read the viewpoints of our opponents. Okay? As a means of understanding what their argumentation is and how to counter it. All right? Etymology matters. I mentioned that a little bit earlier on. For me, and this is just a tool in the toolkit, names will tell you a lot about experience, or at least be a helpful tool in communicating justice. All right? So you hear a name, you can think you can make that name connect to something historical or present. I think that's an opportunity. And then 5, be comprehensive, clear, but most importantly, be concise. Okay? You're not going to be able to preach a 30-minute public sermon. You know, it's not going to happen. Right? How can I make as many indelible points as I can make in the shortest amount of time possible? Right? Not that you want to speak in sound bites. That's something that you need to have in your mind when you have public address. What can become mantra? What can be something that is repeated? So one thing that I say often, and now it's being repeated in a number of places, is that white supremacy comes with a body count. It does. Yeah. So we're talking about white supremacy, we're talking about bodies. That's easily translatable, okay? Across a number of media, whether it be in print, whatever, all right? So you want to be able to get in and get out. Now, they gave me open opportunity to speak at the city council. You saw that address, right? But I would have missed my opportunity had I used 10, 15, 20 minutes, right? Question is, how can I say the most that I can say and use as little time as is needed? Those are just a few suggestions in terms of preaching in this unjust world. Defining preaching, once again, is not what happens in our pulpits, but what happens in public spaces, okay? I think we're right at time, but if anyone have any quick questions, we'll have some more opportunity to engage. Yes?
Pastor, you know you're one of my favorite people.
Oh, you're kind.
We had lunch a few weeks ago, and you were talking about that report.
Yes.
I wanted you to share the opposite side of that report, as far as billionaires and...
Yeah. So this is what makes, thank you, Doctor, this is what makes Dallas such a sinister city. You heard all the statistics that I mentioned in relation to poverty, but Dallas makes more new millionaires than any city in America.
Wow.
Okay? Dallas has the fastest growing business district in the city of America. Dallas has the second fastest growing business infrastructure development in America. Second to only, you may be surprised at this, Fort Worth. Okay? This is a land of milk and honey, but it only flows in the north.
Wow.
Okay? And so that's what makes Dallas such a hard conversation, is that the levels of poverty we face in the city is not because of a lack of resource. It's because of intentional acts to withhold. Okay, thank you for that opportunity. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So you gave us, Doctor, all of the public displays of preaching during this era.
Right.
So with that, does your dynamics or your rhythm play a part in the delivery in the different spaces?
Great question. And I think that's going to be a question that will change based upon the personality. I try to be who I am regardless of where I am. A voice, the tenor of the voice, the points that are made with very little change. Even if I'm preaching in a majority European space, I don't shift that much, okay? Because I want to be authentic in my voice and who I am, okay? There are some nuances that you do adjust for culture, for effectiveness, but I think you have to be true to yourself, right? When you stand, regardless of where you stand, right? And that type of authenticity really plays well when people know and believe that they can see your heart, right? Great question. Anyone else? Most immediately has a question now or a comment. Comments are welcome as well. Yes?
Your comments about Dallas, have you committed those to print? I mean, is there a book out there that I can buy and give to people about the city of Dallas?
Thank you, Dr. Walker. And let me thank you publicly. Let me thank you publicly. Anyone of you who've ever had Dr. Walker, you know that you are mandated to learn Luke 4, 18 to 19. You cannot get out of that class unless you know. But that's a wonderful foundation for unpacking the text. So some things you'll find here in this book, Stakes is High, which I've already mentioned, a few of those stories. I didn't include it here. Some of you know that I was one of the speakers on July 7th where the police shooting happened. You can Google and see my remarks that were there, but you have some of that story in here as well, some of the things happening in the city. There's more I can share, but hopefully this will be a resource that's helpful. Yes?
I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions. I'm sorry. I looked at number 4, etymology matters. I didn't know what etymology meant, so I looked it up, and it's the study of origins of words and the way in which their meanings have changed throughout history.
Right.
So how do you search that word throughout history? Like, how do you do that?
I don't necessarily engage in a full historical view of the word. It's more about how a name in particular can be useful for this moment, right? So again, with Bolton, Sean John, that's such an interesting name, such a unique name. And Mothers Against Police Brutality said, we're having this piece out from the Dallas Police Headquarters, want you to speak. Knew media was going to be there. Knew that I was there to memorialize this individual, to speak well of, eulogize, right? But this is someone that I really don't know, right? So how can I use a name not only to uplift the individual, but also to uplift the moment? So what I found out, and the very little information that was available at the time, was that he was a Bible study leader, in addition to a worship and praise leader. So I said, okay, this would be someone who's well-versed in Scripture. Okay, so it would be appropriate to engage or lift up Scripture in this moment. Okay, but how do I get there? How do I, preachers, we're trying to figure out how do I, like a freeway, what's the entrance ramp on, and what's the exit route off? How do I get on and how do I get off, right? So I'm trying to figure out how do I get on? How do I actually make all of this connect? And again, when I found that his name means a broad valley. Obviously, everything connected with valley in Scripture, and in particular because of the death and despair of this moment, I thought about the valley of death, right? And that became helpful for me. That's just something that I found useful. You may find it useful. If nothing else, and I'm at my time, if nothing else, as you are going out, particularly if you're in seminary now, you're going out to serve in this age, you must be prepared to extend your pulpit beyond your walls.
That's right. That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
Regardless of what tradition you come out of, we are in a time and space where we must vocalize, we must use prophetic utterances in public spaces. And the other story of this, come on, Christian, as I'm going to surrender this mic to you. The other thing against what most people would say today is that the public actually wants to hear from you. Okay? They don't want you to run the table. They don't want you to show up and be the expert around the table and say, I know everything's going on, right? They want to censor those who are closest to the pain. But there are persons who are not even active in religious spaces who value and celebrate the words of the prophet. And you want to make sure that if you're invited in that space, you have something meaningful to share. Thank you very much.
Dr. Waters, on behalf of the Black Seminarians of Perkins School of Theology and the wider community, we thank you for your time here, and we thank you for your prophetic witness. As one of my favorite prophets says, we know what the Lord commands of us, and you do just that, so thank you. Let's give him a hand of praise. All right, so it has come time to eat, actually. So if and then after we move through the line quickly, we will introduce Dr. Stewart, and then we'll continue with today's lecture. Does that work for everybody? All right. So Dr. Stewart, would you mind blessing the food for us?
Sure.
Okay. Give her a quick taste.
Let us pray. For this time of reflection and enlightenment, inspiration, and even agitation, we give you thanks. For the conveners of this meeting, the Black Seminarians, we give you thanks for their leadership, for the opportunity to enjoy food and fellowship. We say thank you. And even as we eat, we pray that the food that we eat may strengthen our bodies for an even greater prophetic witness and to serve this present age. We pray this for the sake of your kingdom and in the name of the one that I pray to. His name is Jesus. Amen.
Amen. All right, so let's eat. The food is on this side. It serve yourselves if you will.
Right. Of course. I just had to come and see you. I haven't seen you since I was like 12. Are you serious?